Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am, back there in the back. You'll have to speak up. Okay, you're going to, before we go into the questions, let me explain something. I'm a little hard of hearing, and then when you throw in the accent, and then you throw in a little bit of soft-spokenness, I don't understand what you're saying. So stand up and speak up.
Your room that you have your tanks of honey in, what temperature do you have that at?
The room that we have our tanks of honey in is kept at about 75 degrees, and the tanks are kept at 95 degrees for bottling. Now, how much time do we have? Am I getting ready to get the hook here? There's another interesting lesson in that question, and that is about the... We all good? Okay. It's about the enzymes in honey. I don't want to destroy the enzymes that are in honey, those 3 enzymes I mentioned. And if you get too hot, it kills them. And so that's why we bottle at 95. But I admit that if the honey's crystallized in a drum, I have to liquefy it in order to get it in the tanks and pour it. And we shoot for the temperature of around 110. Occasionally it'll get a little warmer, but we try to be very careful. Crystallized honey will go completely liquid, but okay, I'm talking Fahrenheit now. I'm sorry. Well, you can do the math later if you watch the video, if it turns into a video. It's 104 to 105 Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is in centigrade. It will go liquid. And so try not to get too far above that very long. And I'm so sorry, these numbers aren't going to make sense, but there's a lesson here. I know the enzyme diastase has a half-life of 2 weeks at 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And at 179, it's 30 seconds. Now, I don't know what that is in centigrade. That's hot. But if you take it down to room temperature at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, the half-life is 1,000 days. So if you go online and read black and white statements that say this temperature kills enzymes, again, there's always an equation. They're speaking in half-truths. The equation is temperature and time. And so we don't want it to be very warm, very long, and that's the way we play it. We might heat it up to get it liquid, but we back it on down and we bottle it fast because we don't want it to be warm very long, because we want the enzymes to be mostly intact when we put it in a jar. Another question? Yes, sir.
It's not bee related, it's more to do with the Appalachian Mountains. It's just the Scottish connection. You've heard the term hillbillies. From the Scots that went out there, the Hill Williams, because they settled up in the hills. That's where the word hillbillies come from, the Scottish connection.
Okay, so it used to be not long ago that when you used the word hillbilly, you were insulting somebody. But nowadays, but in my area, if you call somebody a hillbilly, it's almost a term of endearment in our area. Now, if you use it in another state and call us hillbillies, we know what that means. It's not nice. But in my area, if you say, hey, you're just a hillbilly, it's like, hey, you're just a country person. So hillbilly doesn't mean quite what it did several decades ago. And then the other term in our country, which you may be or may not be familiar with, is redneck. Redneck 40 years ago was you called somebody a redneck, those were fighting words. Nowadays, redneck just means you're just a hard-working blue-collar man, you know. You're a redneck because you're out in the sun. That's what redneck means. So yeah, it's funny how a few decades can change things. So yeah, I'm not afraid to be called a redneck. Of course, my neck doesn't get red because I wear a bee suit. Yes, sir.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for all the YouTube videos, Bob.
Oh, thank you. It's my hobby these days as I get older.
When you were talking about European foul brood, you said that it was interesting that in bad cases we burn our hives here. It's a notifiable disease, but what you were saying about the impacts of sucrose, do you think that there's an element to play when there's a nectar flow on that can keep diseases like European foul brood low in the hive or eliminate it entirely?
If I understand the question correct, the answer is that a nectar flow tends to bring the level of European foul brood down because of the presence of hydrogen peroxide. It elicits hygienic behavior. Bees that are highly hygienic tend to have less incidence of any kind of foul brood, any kind of brood disease, because they remove it before it turns into trouble. Even American foul brood, which is absolutely deadly, if your bees are hygienic enough, they will keep it under control. There has been research on that, and it is a fact. So I was going to talk about European foul brood a little more, and I'm going to do a little bit, and I'm on dangerous ground here because I know things are different here. I'm big on probiotics. Does anybody in this room use probiotics? Probiotics, okay, go to my YouTube channel, Jörg Mayer, man from Germany, good friend of ours that runs the veterinary lab at the University of Georgia, did a very good lecture, and I filmed it, and I believe it's called The Importance of the Microbiome in the Honeybee. I think if you go to my channel or go to YouTube and put in Bob Binnie and type in honeybee microbiome, I think that video will come up. And it is very good, and he talks about the use of probiotics to combat things like European foul brood and other types of viruses. And there's a lot of research out there that shows that it really, really does have an effect. But a lot of people, some serious research says it doesn't, and some serious research says it does. Something to keep in mind with probiotics, just like the same probiotics we take, they have to be kept cool and they have to be kept dry. And a lot of beekeepers take buckets of probiotics to the bee yard and wonder why it's not doing anything. Well, the bucket just sat in the sun for 10 hours. You know, you got to be very careful with this stuff. We feed it religiously, at least once a month, and I do believe I do see a difference. Some years ago, I bought some queens out of Florida and introduced them into one of my apiaries that had about 48 colonies in it. In 1 month, I watched every colony in that yard get European foul brood except for 2 or 3. And Jörg came and did some kind of like a saliva test, a test tube and a swab, you know, and took it to the lab and said I had more spores of European foul brood in those colonies than he'd ever seen, ever recorded. And I, oh my gosh, what do you do with that? Well, we started pouring in the probiotics, and today that apiary has none. 2 years later, no European foul brood in that apiary. So there's something to it. Can I prove it to you? No. Now, being in Scotland, I think this is going to make sense. When I say this in America, they all look at me like I'm stupid. Can you tell when your dog is healthy because it has a good coat of fur? It's the same thing. You can look into a colony and say, this colony feels and looks vibrant. And probiotics does that for us.
What type of probiotics?
Pardon me?
What type of
probiotics? The brand we use is called Strong Microbials Super DFM. That video, I highly recommend that video. He talks all about that. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I'm interested that you said that you transport your bees quite vast distances, and I just wanted to know more about, is there legalities on, for example, relating to diseases, moving bees such big distances across, like from state to state, or is like the control of diseases slightly different? For example, there's places in Scotland that have no diseases because they're so isolated, and if somebody said, I'm going to take my bees there, everybody would go, no, don't take my bees.
That's an interesting question. I got asked something along those lines. She's asking about moving the bees and perhaps being exposed to diseases, whereas if we stayed home, we were not.
Or transporting diseases to other places.
Absolutely, yeah. So America, the commercial beekeeping industry is highly migratory. I was a part of that for years and years. Somebody asked me this a few months back, and I had to really think about it. I actually truly believe that I've probably traveled with the bees more than 1 million miles. I've so much travel, and that's the way the big commercial beekeepers are there. And so California is the hot spot. When you go into California, you're in a melting pot of stuff. And it's one of the reasons I don't want to do any of that anymore. I don't want to be, this is a topic for an entirely different lecture, but it's really good. And I'm surprised nobody asked me to do that on this little tour. It's about the toxicity that occurs in our colonies, and that our beeswax absorbs the chemicals that the bees are exposed to. And when you go to these agricultural hotspots, your bees are not only being submitted to, you're not only being exposed to potential diseases and viruses from other beekeepers, you're also exposing yourself to chemicals that is highly toxic in the colony. And when you add in on top of that the chemicals that some beekeepers, maybe all of you, I don't know, I have to be careful so I don't insult somebody. When you put the miticides in on top of that, you've got a toxic soup that is highly problematic. Now I'm going to go on the chemical avenue here for a moment. It's not the topic, but to me it's my most passionate thing the more I learn about it. I asked the other night, in my queen talk I talked about contaminated comb being a part of what could show up as a bad brood pattern. And I asked the group, about the miticides they were using, and I found out that you do use Apivar, which is amitraz, correct? And you do use Apistan, which is fluvalinate. What almost no beekeepers in America or here or in many places understand is that some of these chemicals are nearly a forever chemical. And when you use them repeatedly, they build up in your comb and they do not go away. And one that's being used in this country right now today is fluvalinate, which is the active ingredient in Apistan. Somebody's not going to like me for this, but you should not be using Apistan. In fact, in my queen presentation, I have a slide on a research study showing how fluvalinate and Coumaphos, another really bad one, which I found out you do not use, do not go away. And all the wax samples taken across North America were found to be contaminated with those two products. And you've got it here, and you shouldn't be using it, because part of the problem with fluvalinate, not only does it stay a long time in the wax and survives the wax rendering process. In other words, when you buy foundation, if the wax was contaminated, it's still there. Not only does it do all that, but it does not play nicely with many other chemicals, including many fungicides, pesticides, and commercial herbicides. So if you have, if you're using Apistan in this country, I can almost guarantee you, not sure I'd bet my life on it, but I bet a ton of money on it, that everybody in this room has fluvalinate in your beeswax comb. Now, it builds with time, so that's part of the equation. The more you use it, the more you have in your comb, and if it gets high enough and you get exposed to a fungicide that's perhaps put on blueberries or strawberries or something like that, in our country we use a lot of fungicide on those crops, suddenly you have a toxic synergistic interaction in your colony that causes poor queens, low sperm count in drones. The list goes on and on and on, and people are going, I don't know what's wrong with my colony. Even the inspectors can't even tell them, and it really comes down to the toxic soup, the toxic synergistic interactions that are occurring in their own colonies due to what they're putting in it and what the bees are bringing in out of the field. It's a big problem. And I also learned, good for you guys, that you swap your comb out often. In America, many beekeepers do not. They'll let it go 10, 15, 20 years. It just gets black and heavy. And that's where you really run into serious problems. And at a meeting 2 nights ago, I was told that usually your comb is swapped out every 3 or 4 years or something like that. That's a very good practice. So you're eliminating a lot of this problem. But just know it exists. If you got old, dark, heavy comb, it needs to go in the trash. You do not need to leave it in your colony. Lower sperm count, queen's fecundity, in other words, their ability to reproduce in abundance, it all just goes down the tubes. People are wondering what's wrong with their colonies, and they have no idea. There is measurable benefit to replacing your comb in as little as 2 or 3 years, and it's expensive, and it's an expensive endeavor. And in my opinion, you can go farther than 3 or 4 years before you reach the point at which the financial investment equals the outcome or the benefits. But if you're doing it in 3 or 4 years and you can afford it and you're okay doing that, you're better off for it, trust me. So just be very careful. I've turned into an organic beekeeper. The problem is with synthetics. It's not just beekeeping, it's the planet, period, honestly. This is where I can get a little bit, forgive me if I get a little bit up. Chemicals on the planet, we're going crazy. The toxicity, the synergistic toxic interactions that occur in a colony are highly the majority is highly synthetic chemicals like Apistan, Apivar, all of these synthetics. It's the problem. Organics, such organic acids, for instance, like formic acid and oxalic acid, are not absorbed by beeswax. It's the synthetic chemicals which are absorbed into a lipid or a fat, which is exactly what beeswax is. Some chemicals tend to migrate towards water rather than oil, which amitraz is one of those, so it's not as problematic as fluvalinate. But if you go 100% organic to us in my country are oxalic acid, formic acid, and all of the essential oils like thymol, which I use thymol in a gel every August, and then I do oxalic acid in the winter vaporization, 100% organic. Thymol is absorbed by the beeswax comb, but it dissipates with time, unlike the synthetics. The synthetics are the problem. If you can figure out a way to get off the synthetic bandwagon, you'll be better off for it in the long run, and so will Mother Nature and the planet as a whole. We're going toxic at a fast rate. Let me tell you a stat. Forgive me, I'm just way off. Jennifer Berry, my friend that I mentioned or maybe I didn't mention her at this, forgive me. A friend of mine at University of Georgia, Jennifer Berry, who's done a lot of research there, told me about a research article that she had found done in Germany, which stated that, this is a staggering number, 78% of the insect biomass on the planet has disappeared in the last 30 years. Think about that. That's a big deal. Why? I mean, we have to assume that chemicals and toxicity has something to do with that, right? And we can throw out terms like planet warming, climate change, all that, but I really believe it probably comes down more to toxicity from synthetic chemical use than anything else. And as beekeepers, sorry to tell you this, but we're part of the problem. If you're using synthetic chemicals, you're part of the problem. Try to go organic if you can. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so thanks for coming through. I've been a big fan of your YouTube channel for a long time.
Oh, thanks.
And there was one, to go back onto the European foul group, there was one video you did a while back where you experimented with Caucasian honeybees because of the propolis that they produce.
I don't think I had something specific about propolis and European foul brood, but I interviewed Jorg again at his lab at the university, and he talked about it, I think. You know what, I probably said it somewhere, forgive me, because I do bring it up at meetings like this a lot. It could have been in a lecture somewhere. But propolis, if you're interested in the subject of propolis and disease, go online and search the name Marla Spivak, University of Minnesota, propolis. She's done massive research on this subject and proven that colonies that have more propolis have lower incidence of European foul brood. Now in America, we've been breeding propolis production out of our stock for 100 years because nobody wants to mess with it. Sticky, breaks things when you take it apart. Huge mistake. We've been breeding out part of their immune system. The propolis, and she calls it, I'm going to say it wrong, so I won't say it. What she's doing is she's proving that colonies that shellac the inside of their, oh, it was closed, thankfully. Colonies that shellac the inside of their cavity with propolis have lower incidence of European foul brood, American foul brood, chalk brood, and the list goes on and on and on. So you want to breed from colonies that make lots of propolis. It's a good thing. It's good for us too. I eat propolis all the time. Shouldn't admit that, but I ate a lot on the plane coming over here, and while we've been traveling around, I've been talking a lot. I'm talking to a lot of people this far away, and propolis is very helpful for humans too. My wife Suzette will tell you she's absolutely convinced that propolis tincture is really good on sore throats and colds and things like that. There really is something to propolis. In fact, everything that comes out of a beehive has some medicinal property, I'm convinced. You name it. Honey, pollen, propolis, beeswax. The air that comes out of a colony of bees has medicinal properties about it. Yeah, it's magic. Yeah. Yes, sir. Orange shirt, we'll start with you.
What's your views on open mesh floors?
Okay, say it again.
What's your views on open mesh floors?
We use open mesh floors rather than solid floors because there was apparently some evidence some years ago that it helps decrease varroa.
Oh, you're talking about screened bottom boards?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can go down that rabbit hole. Know quite a bit about it actually, because I donated some bees to the University of Georgia to do a study on the difference, and I still remember the number even though it was 25 years ago. If you manage your colonies with a screened bottom board rather than a solid bottom board, aside from all treatments, you will have 14.6% less varroa mite. That's the number if you use screen bottom boards. The problem is it's not enough as a standalone. You have to either add in hygienic bees or varroa resistant bees. You can do other organic or mechanical things like trap drone brood. In other words, take drone brood out of the colony and freeze it and kill mites and then put it back. If you do those two together and don't miss any, you know, that's the problem with drone trapping or mite trapping in drones, is if you miss a few rounds, you just produced a bunch of mites. So you got those two. You can do a brood break where you, on purpose, you make the queen stop laying for a while. That can be helpful. If you requeen a colony by killing the queen and introducing a queen cell, you've automatically done that. If you do it 2 or 3 times, like you do in a queen mating nuke, it could stand alone almost do it. And I'm a big advocate of doing mite washes. And I found out the other night that a lot of people had no idea what I was talking about. In other words, we take a bowl with an inner perforated bowl, and we'll put 300 mites in that bowl and use alcohol or soapy water and swish it around for a long time. And the mites will come off the bees and fall to the bottom of the lower bowl, and we can count them. And we're looking for a 1% infestation or less, and we feel safe. If it goes above that, then we feel like we perhaps should intervene and do an aggressive mite treatment. So these days I'm checking to see if I even need to treat at all. And that's one of the mechanisms I'm using to try to filter out colonies that are resistant to varroa mite. And we have some right now. Right now today I've got about 60 colonies that haven't been treated in over a year, and they're showing almost no varroa mite. And that's what we're going to be breeding from this next summer. So in our country, we call it feral colonies. Is that a word that's used here? Feral bee colonies? Wild living bee colonies, yeah. The feral colonies are making a comeback, whereas 20 years ago you didn't see any. Now suddenly they're around. I have a friend that lives about an hour and a half from me towards the coast in Georgia, and he puts out 75 to 100 swarm traps along a river in that area where there are no known beekeepers, and he collects 75 to 150 swarms every single year, and there's no beekeepers. So what's that tell you? The feral population is making a comeback, and then we beekeepers, if we can also add to that by trying to find the mite-resistant population with our own outfit and breed from that, we can contribute. And I will make a prediction that in America, in 10 or 20 years, varroa mites won't dominate every meeting like it does now. It's varroa mite, varroa mite, varroa mite. Now it might be Tropolalaps, but I don't think it'll be varroa mite, because we're starting to do this resistance thing, and it's showing promise. A lot of people are on that program, and I think in 10 to 20 years it will have made great strides in that direction. So somebody else had their hand up over here. Maybe not. You're scratching your head. You're fooling me. Yes, ma'am.
Just ask what your mite wash is. What do you use for a mite wash? Is it alcohol, or is it sugar and then water?
Well, I actually did a study on that. And there's a YouTube video on it if you want to look at it. I think it simply says alcohol versus soapy water mite wash. It's just a few minutes, and it shows the numbers. I, for years, thought that alcohol worked better because that's what all the university labs were using, but it's not. Soapy water works better than alcohol, and I proved it, and many other people have proved it too. A friend of mine, some of you might recognize the name Randy Oliver, he's the same thing. He proved it also. And it's about a 10 to 20% difference. And part of the problems with soapy water when you're doing this swishing is that it can get quite sudsy, and the suds get in the way. But we've kind of learned how to just the right action, and it's really simple. We just put a tablespoon of degreasing type dish liquid soap in a gallon of water and mix it a little bit, and that's what we use to do this washing with. In our store and in America, you can buy these kits that are made to do that. And I highly recommend you all start doing that if you're not already, and know where your mite numbers stand. You may have colonies right now that have mite resistance and you don't know it because you're just treating everything. And it could be just the reverse. You might think you're doing okay and have a few in the yard that have got 50 or 70 in one of these washes that are way out there, outliers we call them, and they're about ready to crash and contaminate the rest of the yard. It's really helpful to know where you stand in mite numbers. And just in the last few years, I've really started to look at that very carefully, and I've learned a lot. Last fall, we did a test on every single colony in our outfit, and I was kind of surprised at what I found. I learned a lot, actually. I learned that there's these extreme outliers out there that are way loaded. We call them mite bombs. They die, other colonies rob them, contaminate everything else. So I had several of those going on in yards that I thought were okay because, you know, several of the bees in that yard washed okay, and if I wouldn't have washed every single colony, I never would have spotted them. And then I started seeing colonies that hadn't been treated in a year that had 0 mites, to my surprise. So it's fun, not only fun, it's educational, it's helpful, and I think it actually, monetarily speaking, is worth your time and labor. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, why not?
In Scotland here, we have 3 frost-free months, so our season is pretty short. How long will yours be? When does yours start?
Okay, I'm sorry, that one went over my head. Could you say it again?
In Scotland, we have 3 frost-free months. You know, June, July, August, we have no frost.
You have three something, three.
Frost-free.
Months when it doesn't.
June, July and August, and during those months,
So
there is
the
no
month when the
frost.
temperature falls below 0.
I am still, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's me, I don't hear that well, and there's an echo in the room.
June, July and August, there is no frost.
There's no frost?
That's only 3 months.
Oh, we're talking about frost. Oh, yeah. Well, in my area, we have no frost from about the 1st of May till perhaps late September or into October, so longer than you.
Not much, though. Not much.
Not too much. And my yards vary. If you looked at that picture, you saw that the terrain goes up and down a lot. Some of my yards are at lower elevations, and they stay warmer longer in the fall and start earlier in the spring, and the higher elevations get colder in the winter and a shorter condensed. So I've been watching our weather at home, and we're not much different than you right now. We had some nice warm days lately, but if I had to guess, I'd say in general, in the winter, we probably average about back to Fahrenheit again, probably about 5 or 6 or 7 degrees warmer than you do, which would probably be about 4 degrees centigrade, maybe 5. We're a little warmer in the winter than you are.
Do you ever move your lower colonies to a higher space, or the higher ones down to the lower space?
I do move my colonies like that. I move within my own region. I don't go long distance anymore, but I do move within my own region. And I've already done some of that this last fall. I had some yards in the northern areas that I want to be able to split early, so I moved them south of my shop to a lower elevation, and they're ahead of the ones that are in the north, for sure. And there's probably about a 2-week difference, sometimes a little more. So we do move them. I just don't want to, I'm so tired of staying up all night and moving bees long distances, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm too old for it, I think that's the short answer.
Any other questions?
Okay, well, I just warn you all out. That's maybe information too much overload, I don't know. But again, thanks so much for inviting me. I really appreciate, I feel honored to be here, I really do.
Listening to you this evening, to begin with, I was listening and thinking, James, well, the quantities you're talking about are humongous.
Oh, okay.
The distances you you were talking about were humongous.
Yeah, but you know, just because there's a couple zeros on the end that you don't, it's still the same thing, isn't it?
Maybe. Most of us are hobbyists with 4 or 5 colonies.
Okay.
So it was, I'm thinking, oh, jigs. But the thing that stands out is the passion. We are passionate about our bees.
I
We
can
love
see
our
that.
bees.
Yeah.
And you're the same. And
Yeah.
there's so much in common with beekeepers the world over.
Yeah.
I would like to say that I'm very glad to hear your Scottish connections. That was very
Oh,
nice
yeah.
to hear. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's worth telling then.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do have a climate difference here. I think we do have, there's a wee bit of a difference climate-wise. But we don't have bears, which is helpful. So there are differences.
Oh, bears, yeah, bears. Yeah, we have bears.
We don't have. Oh, dearie me. And did you try single-track roads when you were driving in the west of Scotland?
Did I do what?
Single-track roads.
Single track routes?
And 2 cars. Yeah.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah. See, so, okay, this is at risk of, my wife will tell you I have what's called foot and mouth disease. I'm about to do it. My dad told me when I was a little boy, my dad told me many times, he said, my grandfather, in other words, my great-grandfather, is frugal to a fault, and it's because of his Scottish roots. And I kind of see it, because this is dangerous, forgive me. Well, but it's bad, it's a compliment at the same time. You do not waste a square inch. Your roads, if they were just 12 inches wider, you know, that's all it would take, right? And of course, there's a lot of holes in the road up there too. And I see it everywhere. I see the doors are maybe 2 inches smaller. It's just everywhere. I see this fruit.
It's a smaller country than America.
Well, it's more than that. What I see, and I guess this is the compliment part, you guys are very careful about your assets, about using things to their utmost. I see that we have big yards. I live on 13 acres and I don't use most of it. That doesn't happen around here. All these houses are right on the road. There's not big yards. Everybody's like using their property very wisely, and if they're not using it, it's farmland or something. You don't waste anything, as near as I can tell. I was looking at some of the mountainsides you're logging on, my goodness, you know. You guys really, really use your assets to the fullest potential, and that's the frugality that my dad was trying to explain to me about my great-grandfather. He was frugal. We use the term frugal to a fault, meaning almost too much, you know, and he was that way. I recognize it now, and now I see where it's coming from, because Scotland is a frugal country. You're careful with your assets. You don't waste things. Does that make sense?
Our biggest asset is our people, I would say, in the beekeeping community especially. Beekeepers, you're wonderful people. You share knowledge, you share experience, you chew over different ideas, but you give your time, and it's lovely, because this is why I love being a beekeeper, because beekeepers are lovely people. They're particularly nice.
That's true. Beekeepers, I've been all over the place, and beekeepers are a special group of folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.